Hey everyone! So, in case you missed the big news, Culture Study is now on Patreon. We finally have a single home for both the newsletter and the podcast. So, if you've been a paid subscriber, you should have received an email about migrating your membership to Patreon. If you're not a paid subscriber, now is the perfect time to become one. You can sign up for just the podcast for $5 a month, or you can bundle it with the newsletter for $8 a month. And if you're a paid subscriber, just remember that you need to set up your special podcast feed that has the ad-free episodes and all the bonus content. Again, check your email for instructions or reach out to us and we'll help you. You can also find all of this info at patreon.com/culturestudy. Thank you so much for your support during this transition. It really means a lot to Melody and me. All right, on to today's show. This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Peterson.
And I'm Leigh Bardugo. I'm the author of Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, Ninth House, The Familiar, and now the Dregs editions of Six of Crows coming out for the 10th anniversary of Six of Crows.
So your books get recommended constantly in the Culture Study community. We do a lot of book threads, book concierge, recommendations. And that's how I started reading them, was from readers recommending them to me. How do you describe your work to someone who's not familiar with it? The random, when a doctor, they're always like, what do you do? And you're like, I write books. And they're like, what kind of books? And you're like, this is awkward. How am I going to describe this? So what do you do?
Well, what I always say is I write fantasy novels, but that can mean a whole lot of different things depending on what kind of fantasy you're interested in.
Totally.
I think it really depends. When somebody says, where should I start? That's always the question that I can say, well, if you are looking for a lighter read, you could start with Shadow and Bone. If you like YA, Shadow and Bone. If you like something with a little more grit and heft, then Six of Crows, Six Dangerous Outcasts, One Impossible Heist. And you can always tell when people, I think, men frequently lock in with the heist. They're like, ooh, heist. I've seen Ocean's 11. I enjoy that, sure. And if you're if you're ready to go someplace much darker and you enjoy academic settings, then I would point you to Ninth House. And if you like historical fiction, I would definitely point you to The Familiar. But they're really all about my desperate attempts to make magic seem real.
Yeah.
And to sort of explore magic almost as a kind of influence or commodity. And
yeah.
I think too, they're also almost, and this was a thread I didn't really see until I could step back and look at, a decade of work and say, okay, these are all stories about people who the world views as expendable and how they carve out a place for themselves in it.
Yeah. No, and the thing I loved so much about Ninth House and its sequel is that it understands how power and secrecy are intertwined, right? And magic as power, as a form, something that you can leverage over other people. But then what happens when someone who you think shouldn't have that power has it?
I mean, it really is about access. And something I discovered when I went to college was there was this kind of secret language that operated. And it's still, I was talking to some friends about this last night, that the class anxiety I developed in college kind of never went away. It's still with me now. And I was a smart kid, and then all of a sudden you're in this environment and you encounter people who just know the code.
Yep.
They know how to work the system. They know how to dress right, eat right, talk right. And for me, that was sort of one of the most powerful guiding principles as I went into the story. Here was this girl, Alex, who had been given this opportunity and wanted desperately to make the most of it, and is doing everything she can to. But the only way she's really going to be able to navigate that world is to essentially accept her difference, who she is and what she can do that nobody else can, and to sort of become the natural detective she was always meant to be. But
right. And assimilation is not possible. You can try to assimilate, right?
Yeah.
But you cannot smooth all of your edges, especially.
No, my feeling has always been they can smell it on me. I can think they're like, oh, you're not old money, are you?
No,
that's totally not Montauk that I smell on you, is it? It's the San Fernando Valley. Yeah.
So you are in the middle of a book tour.
Yes.
What are you celebrating right now?
I am celebrating the release of The Invisible Parade, which is my first picture book. I co-authored it with John Picasso, who is also the illustrator. And it is a book set on the night of Dia de Muertos, when a young girl named Kala is grieving the death of her grandfather, and she really doesn't want to join in the celebrations honoring him, but she makes herself go to the cemetery anyway,
Mm.
and she loses her family in the hustle and bustle, and she encounters four mysterious horsemen, and each has a lesson to teach her about grief.
And what made you want I mean, we're gonna talk about this throughout the entire episode, but, like, switching modes, like, did this feel like a challenge, something that you wanted to do, something that someone told you you could do and you're like, "Well, I should try." Like, how did you arrive here?
I mean, I always loved picture books. I collected them when I was a teenager. I
Mm,
think for me, it was very close to both my love of poetry and my love of comic books.
yeah.
It was this relationship between image and word that I found incredibly powerful. And you find such extraordinary art in these books. They take years of an illustrator's life, and you can really tell in the ones that have care put into them. So I always wanted to write one. And I had particularly, after my father's death, I thought a lot about how much I would like to write a picture book that would help families talk about grief and
Mhm.
help kids and parents talk about grief. And I kept banding around these ideas, but they were always sort of very, very poetic, very somber, and a little pretentious, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, yeah.
And then John, who I had been friends with for years, came to me and he said, I have an idea for a book we should write together. And I honestly cringed because people say this to me a lot, and it's
Yeah.
usually literally a doctor did this when I was in a Las Vegas hospital room with a hole in my intestines. This doctor literally pitched me and was like, and we'll split you write it, I have the idea, and we'll split the profits 70-30. And I was like, sir, I am hip to an IV.
Also 70-30. Are you freaking kidding
I
me?
know, right? Who do you think is doing the work here? This is an important lesson. The work is not the idea. Ideas are easy. The
Also,
work is the work.
only a man would have proposed that split. I'm just saying.
It was fairly shocking, and thankfully I was on some very serious painkillers and could not throw anything at him. But so when John said this to me, I was like, oh God, how are we going to stay friends when I say no? But then he
Yeah.
said, it's the Wizard of Oz set in a graveyard.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, my brain had sort of caught fire. When you do hear an idea you love, I feel like I instantly can visualize it, start imagining it, and I thought,
yeah.
oh, this is the way to this story about grief, because this is an adventure. It's not
Yeah.
just me meditating on my feelings. This is a hero's journey where this young girl can actually experience this powerful journey through these cemetery gates. She can encounter the world of the dead, and in that way reconnect to the world of the living. And that was sort of our touchstone as we wrote that book.
Yeah. When you were growing up, you've described this in a few interviews, but like I have such a vivid picture of nerdy you as a teen. What did you read when you were a teen?
Oh gosh. Well, I read everything off my parents' shelves, right? So
Mhm.
I read like Ken Follett's, like
Yes.
his Cold War books. Way too young, way too young to be
Yeah,
reading those.
totally.
The things I really consumed kind of obsessively were Stephen King,
Yeah.
Diana Wynne Jones, Robin Hobb. Dune was
Yeah.
a very pivotal book for me. I wasn't that, this is, I shouldn't admit this, but I wasn't that into Lord of the Rings, but I was into Dragonlance, which is basically Lord of the Rings Redux. And I read probably 30 books in that series.
Uh-huh.
But I also read, that was also when I read Louise Erdrich for the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
One of our teachers assigned a short story called Flora that had been pulled from, I think it's Tracks. And
Ah,
I had never encountered magical realism before. And that story completely shifted the way that I looked at fiction. Um, So I read everything. I read absolutely everything. But like my comfort reads, the books I came back to again and again were like Interview with a Vampire
Yeah.
and Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption and Eyes of the Dragon. And I was a genre nerd.
Like the thing about genre, and especially I think when you're a teen and looking for that escape of what I think of in my head as reading like a teen, right? Like that incredible immersion feeling is like you want the abundance. Like you don't just like if there's only one book in a series, you're like, well, what does this have to offer me? Like you want there are 20 out there for me to lose myself in for not just tonight, but like months. And then I can reread them.
I don't think I was that kind of reader when I was a
Really?
kid. I was
Really?
intimidated by series. Yeah, I was frequently drawn. I often bought books just based on the cover. Like I remember there was a series called I want to say Sunrunner's Fire by I want to say Melanie Ron, but I may be misremembering. And there was this one cover that I thought was just so cool, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I got to read 3 books to get there. That's fine. It was like book 4 or something.
Yeah.
So I I think though that sense of immersion is so powerful, and I think also you need those other worlds when you're growing up. I was a
Mhm.
very I was no surprise. People who become authors are not kids who fit in, but I was really lost when I was, especially in my junior high years, and these books gave me worlds where I could imagine myself thriving,
Yeah.
where being smart and creative and prepared and clever and adaptable were so much more important than the things that seemed important in the world I was stuck in,
Yep.
where I wasn't pretty and I wasn't cute and I wasn't cheerful and I didn't have the right body and I didn't know the right thing to wear and I didn't get invited to parties. Here was a world where things mattered and they had stakes and where I could potentially be a hero.
My junior high fixation was Star Trek: The Next Generation,
Nice.
the show, but then also the books. And I think so much of it was like it was a legible world for sure, but like the uniforms to me felt so comforting because I spent so much time thinking about what I was going to wear just constantly, like just so much
Oh, I love
anxiety.
that.
And so I was like, yeah, and also intelligence valued, right? Like,
Hmm.
what a concept. Something that is, at least at that point and where I went to school in a small town in Idaho, not, was not what was valued or like that I thought would make me important. So that other universe was incredibly beguiling to me.
Yes, I can absolutely see that. I was actually in uniforms from basically the time I was 5,
Ah,
which just meant when I went to college, I spent every day like an hour trying to figure out what to wear because I didn't understand clothing. Like everything was costuming to me. Who am
right.
I today? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good way a better way to think about it than like, how am I going to get. I mean, I guess it is like even when I was obsessed with like getting a shirt that just said Calvin Klein on it
Hmm.
from Macy's for $32 or like just said Massimo or something like that.
Well,
I
I
was like,
think that's partially why I got into first punk and then goth was
yeah,
it was this it has its own code, right? Let's
yeah,
not pretend that's not about a certain kind of conformity either, but it has a very specific these are specific aesthetics that reject what is immediately popular,
yep,
and those aesthetics don't change over time. The kids who are goth now look the same as I did when I was 15.
yep,
So that there's a certain sense of permanence and sort of an attachment to a subculture that feels, I don't know, a little bit that is rebellious in its own way, but that I think also gives you a kind of niche that you don't have otherwise.
yes. And I was too scared to be goth. Which is like a great regret, right? That to like embrace a subculture. And I think part of it too was there were like one and a half goth kids, right? Like there was
It's
one and
not
then
too
that
late. It's not too late. You come over, get you some black lace, some veils, you'll be good to go.
This episode of the Culture Study podcast is brought to you by Graza. The holidays are here, and we're here to tell you that olive oil makes a perfect gift. Like, this is such a good gift for that person that you're like, they kind of buy everything that they want for themselves. Do you know what I mean, Melody?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like when you get into your 30s and 40s, you're like, I want to bring something to this thing, or I want to give something to this person in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but what do I bring? My partner's family has this fancy white elephant, which makes it not a white
Oh,
elephant. I think I've told you about
yeah.
it's not a white elephant
That's just
when it's
stressful.
fancy, but this would be the perfect thing to bring. So I would personally bring not just one bottle of Grasa, I would bring the 3-pack.
Also great if, a lot of people will just kind of default to a bottle of wine, but if you have a
Yes.
friend who doesn't drink, fancy olive oil is like maybe even better.
Fancy olive oil is better,
Yeah.
especially because sometimes you like, I don't know, it's really hard to pick wine for someone whose taste you don't actually know, you know?
True.
I have a lot of bottles of wine that just kind of hang out at my house waiting for someone else to come over and drink them. But Graza's Duo Set, this is something that you will absolutely use. So the Duo Set includes the Sizzle Extra Virgin Cooking Oil and their Drizzle Extra Virgin Finishing Oil. There's also this new dinner party pack that comes with a limited edition bottle of wine, the olive oil for both the cooking and finishing, plus a custom corkscrew, and a bag of extra virgin olive oil potato chips. It's like a complete dinner party in a box. All you need is, I don't know, just throw in like a bag of pasta from Trader Joe's. That'd be perfect. Right now, if you go to Graza, you can get 10% off your first order on their site. So head to graza.co/culture study and use culture study to get 10% off your order and get cooking this holiday season with some fresh, delicious olive oil. Today's episode is sponsored by Blue Land. Okay, so Melody, I have this thing about hand soaps. I hate it when it's a hand soap that has like a smell that's so overpowering that every time you like waft the hand near your face, you're like, "Ugh, I washed my hands 4 hours ago and it still smells like that."
And
But
it
at the
makes you
same
not want to wash your hands.
but at the same time, I also really like it when soap smells really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I am really obsessed with the new Blue Land holiday soap smells. Like it comes in this pack. So all Blue Land stuff has like one receptacle that remains your receptacle. You're not throwing it away after one use. You like have this thing that you can wash, you can refill, and then you have this tin that has all of your little refill tablets in it. And Blue Land has this new series of holiday flavored hand soaps. My favorite is wintry pine. It's the kind that like you look at it and it doesn't have the like viscous feel of soap, but then you press on the thing and then it's all like foamy and good and it just smells like you have a Christmas tree in your kitchen, and then you wash and it feels really clean, but then it doesn't smell like that for the rest of your life. Honestly, ideal. I love it. So part of what I love about Blue Land is the fact that you're not just like cycling through this endless series of plastic just to keep your house clean, but also all of their products are 100% microplastic free, made with certified clean ingredients with no chlorine, bleach, or harsh chemicals. And they're safe to use around everyone in my house, my dogs, my plants, my partner, me. I just really like them. They're great. So if you want to stock up on your own set of sustainable cleaning products or give beautiful sustainable gifts to your friends and family, you can go to blueland.com/culture and save up to 30% during Blue Land's holiday sale. Don't wait. They only do this once a year. That's 30% off during Blue Land's holiday sale by going to blueland.com/culture. That's blueland.com/culture for 30% off. So usually on the show, we pick a topic and then we find the right guest. This time we were like, you can come on the show. Let's talk about anything that we want. And so we just asked readers, because we have so many listeners and readers who love your stuff, to come up with questions to ask you. And they came up with tons. So
Okay.
we're going to talk about YA versus adult, that naughty understanding, like KNOTT, not NAUGT.
Could be both.
Yeah. Fantasy and romantasy, all sorts of stuff. So this first question is about genre, and it comes from Jen.
I have 2 questions. So the first one is, your novels all have romance in them, and they are fantasy, but I wouldn't label them as romantasy. What is the defining characteristic of romantasy? 2, the romance genre is very defined, like tropes, happily ever afters, whereas the fantasy genre is a bit more loose. When do you think combining the genres is most successful and least successful?
So I was reading an interview with you And you said something that you already said, you just like teed us up, which was that like, I love genre. And I know you were talking about genre books, but I think that we both love thinking about genre as a concept and like how it
Mm.
gets challenged, all of those things. So let's see if we can work through this question in order.
Yeah, I love that. I love that Jen was like, "I see you don't write romantasy. Define it for me." So I feel like she's set a challenge, and I appreciate that. Thank you for throwing that gauntlet down. I mean, look, I'm inclined to say that it is that romantasy, much like YA, they are not actually genres. They are categories. They're marketing categories,
Yep.
and and I think anytime one of these categories kind of takes over, when it starts driving the sales in publishing, people get very invested in trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So when I was starting out back in 2012, and I started out in young adult before I moved to adult, I think I was on something like 7 panels where the panel was just titled, "What is YA?"
Yeah.
And I think now those questions are being posed about romantasy. Okay, I'm going to take a shot at this. Please don't set fire to me on the internet if I get this wrong. But I think that in fantasy, as most people think about it, there's a primary goal that is to fight a war or solve a murder or go on a quest for an object, whatever it is, that's the kind of foregrounded plot.
Yeah.
And then the romance happens either as a subplot or is barely even suggested if it exists at all. And I actually think actually a great example of it not existing but still being a driver would be the X-Files,
Yeah.
which was my first shipping show and that launched 1,000 ships. And I think especially in the original series, there's so little actual romance,
Yep.
but there's no question that their relationship is this primary driver for the show. Okay, so and then with romantasy, I think that lens shifts focus a little bit. It's not that there isn't a war or a quest or a murder to solve. It's that the romantic relationship is in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
And that relationship and its success or failure is actually more fundamental to solving this backplot than the plot itself.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah, no, I
make
think that,
sense?
like, yeah, and I like your use of the word lens here because it's like a lens going in and like, what is the lens focusing on? What is slightly out of focus when the lens
Right.
goes in and out, right?
And then I think the sort of people find their subgenres within that
Yep.
category. So
Yeah.
I would be inclined to say that the expectation of that marketing category is that there will be more explicit sexual content, but I don't actually know if that's true. I think there's probably a pretty wide range within the category, and people sort of have to find their authors or their niche within that. And same with, I'll see people say, I only want first person, or I only want this particular trope. And that's when the genre really does become a genre as opposed to a category and becomes kind of
Right.
hyper specific. Yeah.
Right. I think about the scholar Linda Williams, who's this famous genre scholar, and she was working with film and television in the way that she thought about this, but she defined melodrama not as a genre, but as a mode.
Mm.
And so you can have an action film that is a melodrama. You can have a drama that is a melodrama. And there are all of these understandings of like how a melodrama works in terms of trying to sort the world into something that is morally legible. Like that is the
Yes.
overarching historical purpose of melodrama. But then it can be mapped onto so many different genres.
That's so funny because I had never watched Yellowstone, and we watched a
Oh,
couple of
total melodrama.
episodes of Yellowstone. Yeah, and it was somehow not what I was expecting, how soapy it is, but
Yes.
that is exactly, it looks like this Western, you have these tough talking, tough writing, manly men and so forth, but it is absolutely melodrama, and to me feels cut much more from the same cloth as like Dynasty and Dallas
Yes.
from my youth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of those things where like, because of the way that genre is oftentimes like ascribed with gender connotations, that we're like, oh, well, that would never be a melodrama. Like, oh, Yellowstone could not be a soap, or a
Right.
Tom Cruise movie couldn't be a soap, right? If we're using
Right.
kind of like soapy and melodrama somewhat interchangeably. But like, absolutely. There's so many Tom Cruise movies that are soapy.
When I went to see Dune, Dune was, this touchstone story for me growing up. But when I went to see Dune, I was like, oh my God, this is young adult. This very special boy with his very special powers who meets this beautiful, very special girl who also, like I was like, okay, this is definitely young adult, but it's couched in all of this super deep world building. And yet, different time, different place, different marketing strategy, who knows?
Right, right. No, that's so interesting. Especially too with like casting Timothy Chalamet. Like the
Mhm.
casting is doing work in terms of like
Sure.
even slotting it as more appealing to YA as in like
Very
contrast to
different
adult.
vibe than David Lynch casting Kyle MacLachlan. Very different hair situation.
Okay, our next question comes from Kirsty, and it's about something she's noticed in the fantasy genre. Melody's going to read it for us.
A lot of fantasy appears to be much less concerned with world building than it is with the creation of a central relationship. It feels like a lot of newer or popular work is starting with a set of tropes or a relationship endpoint and then spiraling out from there. I know that there are authors building vast, detailed worlds. However, it does feel like a lot of the literature that is hitting the mainstream is shifting focus away from the world building. Are authors and publishers being encouraged to put focus on covering tropes at the expense of creating more expansive worlds?
Yeah, this is like building on that other question. And I think,
Yeah, we're deep into the romantasy now.
yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a diplomatic way of asking if publishers are pressuring authors to write romantasy. I may be wrong. If I got
Yeah.
that wrong,
No, I think,
apologies.
yeah.
And the answer is yes and no. So I'm lucky enough to have a readership who knows the way I write and
Yeah.
brings certain expectations to those books. And I think if I suddenly pivoted to a market trend, I don't think people would be satisfied by that. And I'm not saying that if I suddenly got if that's where my brain was going, I wouldn't go there. But I think that would be a shift in my own work. That said, yeah, romantasy has sort of dominated the bestseller list for the last couple of years. That's a very real thing. Publishers operate on very narrow margins.
Yep.
And they're much like Hollywood, always looking for the big hits. And so they absolutely have shifted. And you can see this very clearly in the way they market books and the way that they're acquiring books and series. And I certainly know people who are newer to the publishing process who are getting pressured to slot books into that mode and that mold. And that certainly creates also a pressure on aspiring writers who think, oh, if I want to sell a novel, this is where I have to go.
Right.
The only problem with that is trends come and go.
Mm-hmm.
The books that are popular now were not popular 8 years ago, which were different from the books popular 8 years before that. I always think back to when I was in my early teens, and the books, the big bestsellers that I was reading off my sister's shelf were, Judith Krantz, Jackie Collins, Sidney Sheldon.
Daniel Steele.
Well, Danielle
Yes.
Steele is still a titan, but she's still publishing. But all those other names have largely been forgotten, which is a shame because Sidney Sheldon, despite how wildly homophobic his books were, was an absolute master of plot. Like, you can learn a lot by reading a Sidney Sheldon book. All of that said, I think it is a little unfair to the people who are out there aspiring because unless you're a very fast writer and you are acquired quickly and then your publisher crashes that book, brings it out in roughly 6 months or less, you're playing a dangerous game. You're
Yep.
gambling against when that tide will turn and the market will shift to thrillers or cozy mysteries or whatever it may
Know.
be.
What
We don't
what is
know.
it gonna be? We don't know.
Nobody
Yeah.
knows. Look, nobody ever sees the trend coming until the trend is here, and then they play catch up. And
Yeah.
my concern right now is that I think that people are, and I think this is partially because of social media, it's partially because of the way marketing is operating right now, but that the expectations of romantasy are being put across all fantasy books. And I think that's frustrating both for authors and for readers because it doesn't work that way. We're not all writing it.
I've been thinking too about how a lot of fanfic is being optioned and redone, right? Like is being
Mhm.
recrafted into original text. And I wonder how that is also influenced, like because if you have like a fandom is always going to place the relationship first,
Yes. That's where
right?
fanfiction comes from. Is I
Right.
didn't get enough of this, or I wanted to see this
Yes.
relationship that didn't happen,
Yeah.
or I want to see this alternate universe where they're not fighting this battle but they can just run a coffee shop. Like
Yeah.
that is the heart of fanfiction. Yeah.
So you get the relationship forward
Yes.
positioning, I guess would be the way to say it. That's it. That's interesting. I haven't thought much about that.
Well, a friend of mine pointed out, and I think this is very true, that one of the pleasures of reading. I've never been I'm too old. I came up at the wrong time, and I did not get into fic. But I've always been sort of grateful to fic writers because they keep the series alive and people
Yep.
engaged while you're trying to write your books. Like I've never. For me, that I think it's been a positive thing.
Yeah.
But she pointed out that with fan fiction, people already know the characters, and so you have instant buy-in. Like they already know their traits, they already know the role they
Yep.
play in the narrative. So even if
Yep.
you're shifting to another world or you're aging them up or whatever it is, you have this kind of instant buy-in. And she made this, and I'm not going to name check her because if people get angry, I don't want get angry at me, don't get angry at her. But
Yeah.
she said this is also what the kind of tropification of fiction is doing, because instead of characters, you have archetypes, right? So you're seeing a lot of the same pattern, even in the way that characters look in terms of heroines and heroes. And so people find them instantly recognizable and they instantly know, oh, this is enemies to lover. Oh, this is second chance romance. I recognize this. And so you get that instant buy-in right away.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Well, and also goes back to melodrama because one of the things with melodrama is you have these incredibly legible and understandable characters.
It's almost like commedia dell'arte.
Yeah.
Like
Yes,
you
yes.
know the characters. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We were talking a couple of months ago with Sarah McLean on the pod about why first books from romance writers are often so good. And it's because they're still really messy.
I think it's also because like the id is alive.
Yes.
Like the thing that we always talk about this among writers, like finding your id and or finding the buttons that get pushed
Yeah.
that really draw you personally into a story. Like what's the candy? What's the sauce? And I do believe, like I know I was writing from my id in Shadow and Bone. And I think that you can really see that in a lot of first books.
Yeah.
And that it was very powerful in Six of Crows, right? Because it was all the heist narratives I love. It's the man who only loves one woman and can't tell her.
Yeah.
It's nerds with secret power. Like I remember watching The Accountant, which is, if you care at all about autism, don't watch this movie. It's wildly offensive. However, I have watched that movie like 15 times. I love it. And I can point to exactly the moment I lock in because it has this long, drawn out
Yep.
slog of her first act. And then all of a sudden, this nerdy accountant who can't relate to anything but numbers, who and Anna Kendrick later in the film, all of a sudden an assassin is in front of him and he whips off his belt and he fights the assassin with the belt, and I was like, I'm in. Nerd with secret powers, that's my juice. Like I was like, I love it. So when you can find those buttons and identify them, they become almost like a secret weapon in terms of making sure that you have these kind of little bits of catnip that keep you going in the long haul of writing a novel.
Totally. And that is so alive in a first novel too.
So
like you
alive,
said.
yeah. And you're not thinking about sequels. You're not thinking about an audience. You're not thinking about you're not thinking about any of those things. And anything you can do to get back to that kind of heart, that messy heart, is, I think, a smart thing to do as an author.
The Culture Study podcast is sponsored by Mosh. I think a lot about bars. I eat bars a lot because sometimes you want something that really feels like it gives you energy and fills you up, but you don't have a ton of time to eat. And somehow you're at your house that's on an island and you only go to the grocery store once a week. So you don't have anything good. And you're like, oh, what can I eat? A bar. So I need a variety of bars. And I have bars that I eat for breakfast. I have bars that I eat after exercise, but you really need like a perfect 3 p.m. bar. And for me, the perfect 3 p.m. bar is a Mosh bar Mosh bars actually taste great, and they come in 9 different excellent flavors, including chocolate chip cookie, hazel chocolate chip, and peanut chocolate chip. Mosh also donates a portion of all proceeds from your order to fund gender-based brain health research through the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. That's because 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, and Mosh is working closely to close the gap between women and men's health research. If you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and your brain, especially at 3 p.m. when you need that 3 p.m. bar, Mosh bars are the perfect choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/culture to save 20% off plus free shipping on the bestsellers trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers trial pack or the plant-based trial pack at moshlife.com/culture. Thank you, Mosh, for sponsoring this episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Remy. So if you're one of those people who feels a lot of stress during the holidays, alongside joy or whatever, but like also feels the stress of like planning how you're going to fit everything in and like how am I going to decorate and also find presents and like also please every family member in my life, but like also go to 17 cookie parties. And there's just a lot. There's a lot of things that happen. So if for some reason you feel stressed during this holiday season, the sort of stress that might lead to involuntary teeth clenching or grinding, then we have a solution for you. Approximately 30% of U.S. adults grind or clench their teeth at night, and Remy makes custom night guards that are clinically tested to prevent teeth grinding, reduce jaw tension and facial muscle strain, and improve sleep quality. You'll get the same professional quality and comfort as a night guard from the dentist, but Remy costs you 80% less and is much more convenient than having to go to the dentist's office. And as an extra added cost benefit, you can use your HSA or FSA benefits towards your night guard at checkout. So here's how it works. You receive your impression kit that comes right to your door. Then you follow Remy's step-by-step instructions to get your perfect impression. Remy then crafts and ships your custom fit night guard, and you can start wearing it immediately. Also, for this holiday season, Remy is gifting their customers with their 2-in-1 foam that both cleans your night guard and whitens your teeth for free when you order a night guard between now and December 24th. Go to shopremy.com/culture and use code CULTURE to receive 55% off your new night guard. Plus, you get the free 2-in-1 foam, which I don't know. I've had a lot of like retainers and night guards and stuff in my life, and they need cleaning. So it's really good to have this. That's shopremi.com/culture for 55% off the night guard plus the free gift using code CULTURE. Thank you, Remy, for sponsoring this episode. So our next question is about an element of fantasy that a listener named Sam wants your input on.
So much female-targeted fantasy writing has sexual assault in it. Why do you think this is? And as an author who has added this to your own writing, why? It seems strange to write something that's triggering to a large percentage of the target market. Personally, I'd love to read Ninth House, but I just find the sexual assault content too intense to read. Do you have a point of view on people saying this is done for shock value and not always necessary to the story?
I think this is a question that has the answer in the question, which is it's basically saying many women experience sexual assault. Why would you write about it? I write about it because many women experience sexual assault. And I don't see people asking authors like Stephen King or Joe Abercrombie about it. Mm-hmm. And yes, you could say it's female targeted, but I'm putting big quotes around that because we don't get to decide who reads our books and likes them. And men are more likely to, first of all, men read less than women. They buy less books. We know that reading drops off for boys around the middle grade years, and they often don't come back from that, particularly with fiction. But certainly we know women are reading Stephen King's books, they're reading Joe Abercrombie's books. So I think it really comes down to it's less about the audience than it is about the author.
Yeah. I also, like, you've talked about before about how, and it's not as neat as even like describing it this way makes it sound, but like there's disempowerment and then there's a way to re-empower. Like, how does someone figure out where their source of power is?
I mean, I guess I'm still parsing this because
yeah,
even the idea of, she said adding it to your story.
Oh yeah,
I
adding,
think
that's interesting. It's an
I
interesting word
think
choice, right?
it is, and I think I don't add it when it. So when we say shock value, right? This is a derisive term. This is suggesting that this element of the story, this element of the character's experience, is somehow unnecessary to the plot. It's superfluous, and it's just in there to disturb, disgust, repel, shock the reader. And I don't think that my books are like that. I think that that the experiences these characters have are fundamental to who they are and how they operate in the world, and sometimes the vengeance they seek in the world. But it's also that I do want to shock you. I do want to disturb you. I don't want you to read about an assault and simply think, oh, that happened. And I think that we have we put such an emphasis on comfort now, and I will never go after somebody for their reading habits. You read what you want to read. Thank goodness you're reading it all in a world of fractioned attention spans. But for me, as a reader and as an author, I'm not interested in always sinking into a warm bath. I want the experience of jumping into the mountain lake. I want to be shocked. I want to be surprised. I want to find the unexpected. And if sometimes that disturbs me, I call that a plus. So yeah, I also feel like if you really are, I'm being so careful around this, but I'm just going to say it. Like, there's a temptation in me to say, so many women experience sexual assault. I too have experienced sexual assault. But the reality is I'm pretty tired of particularly women authors being called upon to use their trauma or their experiences in the world or their identity as some kind of calling card. We should be able to write what we want. You should be able to read what you want. And if you never want to be disturbed, I don't think particularly Ninth House would be the series for you. But I think you could point to things in Six of Crows or even Shadow and Bone or even The Familiar and say, the Familiar is set in Inquisition era Spain. There's a lot of disturbing things in there because that's the way the world was.
Mm-hmm. Also, fighting ghosts. Sometimes I think about, like, there are things that are inherent to this genre that are like murder is fucking disturbing.
It should be.
Yes.
I mean, I consume a lot of true crime like a lot of people do. Are we desensitized to it? Possibly. So if you read a murder and it disturbs you, well, that's maybe a good thing. Murder bad.
No. Well, and I also think that there are types of, like, sometimes I want to jump into the mountain lake.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of the reason I read, right, is to feel things. And some of those things are good and some of them are bad. Some of them are disgust. Like when people talk about, like, I can't read a book where I don't like the protagonist.
Sure.
And then sometimes you want to read a book and you want it to be a warm blanket that makes you feel nothing.
I have never... I think in part thanks to the way my mom supported my reading habits. It was, as long as you're reading, I don't care what you're reading.
Yeah.
And so there was no dividing line between literary or worthwhile fiction and genre fiction or, and I read across everything. When I go on vacation, I usually pick a mystery. I love a cozy mystery. I'll pick the Thursday Club Murders that's what I want to read on the beach, or I'll pick nonfiction. I'm not going to pick something very heavy because that's not where I want to go. I won't even pick a thriller because I have enough adrenaline in my body as it is. but that's not, you pick and choose. It's like, what are you in the mood for dinner for tonight? And that is exactly the way books should operate. I think I get tetchy when I think there's a kind of almost Victorian sensibility about like what should or should not be written or should not be on shelves or that women should not be exposed to. And that enters into an area that I don't feel entirely comfortable with because I do not, Ninth House there was a lot of kerfuffle when Ninth House was released, not because it's really not that out there compared to a lot of books, but I think because I came out of YA, there was this sort of, a scandal. But it's been on the shelf since 2019. And I can, Six of Crows is probably my most popular book. I don't think there's any question. But Ninth House is a close second. So that to me says that despite or because of their experiences, a lot of women readers are finding that they like these books.
Okay, this is actually a great way to tee up our next question about YA and genre and content. This comes from Erin, and I just really love it. It's really interesting.
Growing up in the 90s, we had a lot of scary and dark entertainment. Ren and Stimpy, Hocus Pocus, things like that. Now that I have a daughter, it seems like danger or fear have been carefully stripped out of everything from books to movies, like Hocus Pocus 2. Do you see YA as the avenue for introducing the full spectrum of human emotions? How do your books play into that?
This is a great question.
I know.
This is so interesting.
I would just add to like Ren and Stimpy and Hocus Pocus, like, I don't know, there were like when you watch stuff on TV, like you just watched random shit, right? Like I watched Unsolved Mysteries all the time,
Yeah.
which was like, that was my exposure to like.
I'm thinking of like when I was in like junior high and high school, I guess also YA was very different then. It wasn't, I think a lot of middle schoolers were reading YA. And I think then you didn't really transition to YA novels, you transitioned to adults. So then I was reading Clive Barker and Stephen King and Ramin Hobb. And, you know, I saw Hellraiser and then I had to read Hellraiser. You know, like I became a Clive Barker addict after that. So, I think that, first of all, I think you can actually point to middle grade first. What about Goosebumps?
Yes.
You know, think about how popular Goosebumps still is because it's a little spooky, a little scary. For me, one of my favorite books growing up was Bunnicula by James Howe, which is about a vampire bunny. And I wrote to him as a kid. We had to write to an author, and he wrote back to me, and it was truly a magical. I still have, it was written on this kind of onion skin paper, and I still have the letter. But I think we're drawn to those things at a very young age because there you can meet the monsters.
Yep.
And you can both meet the monster and best the monster. You can question the monstrous things inside you, right? Which is what Frankenstein is all about, what Dracula is all about. And I think it's important to remember that this is not just a modern invention. This is across cultures. We've always had folk tales, fairy tales, legends, and religious tales, parables that really draw on these deep primal fears. One of the most interesting things I discovered when I was reading Language of Thorns and researching folk and fairy tales was you see the wicked stepmother, not just in Grimm's fairy tales, but across cultures. There are wicked stepmothers. And the reason for this is because so many women died in childbirth. And so you often had other women raising those kids. And these were cautionary tales about what could happen if you mistreated these children or if you married the wrong woman. And so we have to remember that our need for fear and our fear of the dark and our and all of these monsters that really operate as metaphors, they've been with us for a long time. And to try to eliminate them is actually to do a disservice to kids who need them growing up. That doesn't mean you have to throw things at kids at an age when they're not ready for it. Then that's a different kind of disservice. Yeah. But the spooky and the scary, there's a reason kids love Halloween, and it isn't just candy. like to put on to be a monster for a little while, to be the scary one in the world, in a world that is pretty scary, is so empowering. And so I think that gamut of emotions exists in picture books, it exists in middle grade books, it exists in YA books, and of course it exists in adult books. Yeah. And I've always been somebody who found those things delicious, you know, who loved the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, who wanted to meet the monster and see if she could best it or befriend it.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, sometimes in these tales, like, there is this remedy at the end, right? That like everything's okay. Like you touch darkness and the light comes.
And then you're all right.
But then sometimes too, like I'm thinking about different, like I loved Witch of Blackbird Pond
yes.
That
was a big influence on Nikolai, on my privateer character. In Shadow Falls.
I could totally see that. But like, you know, when you don't feel like you fit in, and there are so many books and fairy tales and folk tales about women, whether they're witches or crones or like outsiders, right? And so there's an opportunity for identification and like celebration, even if that like unruly woman has to be shut down at some point in the narrative. Like, you know, all the time I'm like, my mind stops at 2/3 of the way through that book. right? Like, I don't,
Right.
whatever happens in the last third,
Yes.
like, whatever. Like,
Everyone's fine. Everyone is fine.
everyone's fine. And like, Ursula's great. Like, she's just having a really good time at the bottom of the sea. But even just having those moments for identification. And, the thing that always gets me about these conversations about YA is like, you have to trust your kids to kind of figure out what they like. Does this make sense? Like, you're not gonna, like, sometimes you shut down when something doesn't make sense to you and you stop reading the
Mhm.
book. Um,
I think, I mean, there's been plenty of conversation and study around this, but
yeah.
books are so different from film or television. The
Yes.
way we parse visual inputs versus reading is so different.
Yep.
So if you read about a car accident, that is wildly different than seeing the accident happen. Okay, we
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
If you are watching a film about something scary, and something surprises you that you didn't, I thought I was going into one thing and then I got another thing. This happened to me when I went to the movies and there was like a trailer for The Nun or something, and I was like, I did not come here for horror, sir. This is not a Wendy's. So I was like, there's an important distinction there, because when kids encounter things in books, and when adults encounter things in books that they're like, ooh, not my thing, they close the book and then they're done.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with film and television, that can really stick with you in a different way, and our brains record those memories differently as well.
Yes. That's
But
such a good point.
yeah. But
And
I'll
this,
also say this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, there's stuff that you read that doesn't make sense. And that's when we say, like, that went totally over my head. And, like, yeah, that can happen in movies too. Like in Wayne's World, like, half the jokes when I first saw that movie when I was in 7th grade, like, I didn't understand, like, what ribbed for her pleasure meant in any capacity.
Yeah.
But also just, like, so many descriptions of sex and, like, and you also, like, because you don't have modeling necessarily of it, like, the way that it appears in your mind is just like, these people are having sex. Does that make sense? Like,
Yes. I mean, look, I read everything on my parents' shelves.
Yeah.
I read wildly disturbing things. If I'm thinking again about Ken Follett and these books, and the kind of prurience that's in Sidney Sheldon or Jackie Collins. And I was okay. But in part, that's because I had parents who were readers. Okay. And I was also reading a lot of other stuff. So I'm learning the skills to hold different ideas in my head at the same
Yes.
time. I'm learning about one book is much more dangerous than 100 books. And the more you're reading, the more you're talking about those things with your parents, with your friends. Those are valuable experiences. I always say at my events, I don't believe in harmful books. I don't believe in dangerous books. And invariably there's somebody who's like, what about Mein Kampf? And I'm like, that book, and Germany banned that book for years. Did that stop people from being anti-Semites or Nazis?
Right.
It sure didn't,
Right.
and it was available in other places on the internet and so forth. Like, you cannot, it's not the book that's dangerous. It's the inability to talk about the book or parse the ideas in the book that are dangerous.
Yeah.
And I find it somewhat hypocritical, because I saw a lot of talk within the book community for years about how dangerous and harmful books were. Well, guess what? Now that's the language that book banners are using.
Yeah.
So I think our concern needs to lie with the conversations that we're having around material and how much we're paying attention to what kids are consuming. And if your greatest concern is what your child is reading in the library, you're a lucky person, because what they're seeing online every single day is so much more damaging.
Yeah. No, I think about too, like, when people are scared of, let's say, like, just for an example, like, they're scared of their kids getting their hands on ACOTAR. I'm like, are you actually scared of that? Because most of the time, the desire for that particular level of book does not come along until a little bit later. But are you scared of that, or are you scared of the fact that you haven't had a conversation with your daughter about sex or consent or pleasure?
And I feel for parents, because I feel like books are something people feel like they can control.
Yeah.
Right? I see what my kid is reading. I see what's on the shelf.
It's such a good point.
I do not blame parents for wanting to seize control of one of the only things they can seize control over, because unless you are keeping your kid offline, which that's a whole other discussion, the things they are being exposed to on social media, we know now the kind of how early young kids are seeing pornography, and really violent pornography, and how much kids are consuming of that, the kind of violence that's available to people online. Like that to me is, and I'm not a parent, but it feels like this unfightable, unwinnable battle. So I do have a lot of sympathy for parents who are like, how do I get some kind of foothold on this and protect my child's childhood, and the ability to experience the world in positive ways without having my wiring switched up really early.
Yeah. Do you feel like we feel this way because we read so widely as teens that we're like, we're fine. Let them read everything. Sometimes I feel like I'm very permissive in the way that I think about this because I was like, this actually led me to figure out like a lot of my moral code in a way that was independent of other people telling what it was. Do you know what I mean?
I don't look. I believe firmly that there are certain things that should be on middle grade shelves in a library, and certain things that should be YA shelves, and certain things that should be in adult shelves. Like I don't think that's a crazy or wild or controversial idea, right? That's why we have librarians who specialize in those things.
Yeah.
So I think and I think there's something very different about being directed toward a book, right?
Totally.
Like I walk into library, I see this on the shelf, I pull it up, versus, I'm going to go read what's on my older sister's shelf. And I know that I'm pushing the boundaries of this a little, or I know that this wasn't intended for me. That's a totally different experience. Those are two different experiences of access to a book. And I think the worst thing though that we can do is to make young people afraid to talk about these things with us. The more we create taboo and shame around those discussions, I think the worse position we'll be in. But again, I'm not a parent, and that's partially because I think parenting is the hardest gig out there, the most thankless gig out there, and it asks things of people that are a level of unselfishness that I don't think I'm capable of. So only respect to the moms,
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. This question comes from a real fan, and it's going to be just for paid subscribers. So if you want intel on the next book in the Ninth House universe or Leigh's Recs for other fantasy novels, go to patreon.com/culturestudy and become a paid subscriber. Leigh, if people want to find more of you on the internet, where can they find you?
The only social media platform I have is Instagram. That's El Bardugo, just the letter L, not like El Bardugo, like El Bardugo. And so I'm not on TikTok, and I am not on Threads, and I'm not on X or any of those things. And I also have a Substack, and I occasionally do some writing posts there. I also answer questions, and I do a little, I don't have the patience to make a podcast, so I do a little recording called Not a Podcast, where I talk to my readers, because I don't want to edit it or make it polished. So salute you guys for that. But that's where you can find me.
Well, we will direct people there on force. Thank you again for being here today. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts because we have so many great episodes in the works, and I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, go to our Google form at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod or check the show notes for a link. And if you want to support the show and get bonus content, head to patreon.com/culturestudy. It's $5 a month or $50 a year, and you'll get ad-free episodes, an exclusive advice time segment, and weekly discussion threads for each episode. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod.